Until the year 2009, Iceland was considered the happiest country in the world. Then, from one day to the next, it collapsed due to a crisis that led the largest part of the population to poverty and that showed on which unreal foundations the welfare of the island was based. It was a shock because people suddenly became poor and were overwhelmed by debts. However, it was somehow a salvific shock because afterwards, this small population poured into the squares and tried to understand what had happened. At the beginning, they protested with anger and without having any idea of how everything collapsed. However, in the course of time, this confused protest gave rise to a protest movement, a mass revolt that strengthened and managed to reach incredible results. To give some examples, it was able to bring the government down that was then replaced by a new one, as well as the main financial control authorities because they missed to monitor what was happening. The movement successfully wrote a constitution in a completely innovative way. That is, it tried to collect suggestions and information from the largest part of the population. Most of all, it was able to reject the socialization of a debt incurred by some private banks and of the private debt that they wanted to socialize and spread among the population. It is important to tell this story because de facto, in a period in which solutions are proposed as inevitable, and we are told that we can only follow one way, this story shows a different point of view and other possible alternatives. Very little was said about this affair, probably because it could really diffuse messages that must not be known, such as the idea itself that people can join and together can counter some mechanisms. That is to say, those mechanisms that are usually established by the authorities, that are international, and are imposed to the populations that suffer without apparently doing anything. And that seems to have been disproved by the concrete Icelandic example. Therefore, knowing this story is probably dangerous for the system. However, I am a journalist and I didn't know anything about that. I realized that essentially no one knows anything about it. There isn't an objective knowledge of what happened, of the facts. Probably, the Icelandic experience cannot be repeated. However, I believe that no experience can be completely repeated. But if we observe Iceland, that is a very small island lost in the ocean, maybe we can discover some dynamics that are instead shared by the whole world, or at least by the Western one, and thus we are forced to reflect on the reasons of such dynamics and on the possible solutions. Exactly for this reason, we decided to entitle this documentary, "A Tiny Knoll on the Lawn of the World." That is a quote by Einar Mar Gudmundsson, an Icelandic writer, and that actually means that the more we observe something with the microscope at the micro level, the more we can become aware of the dynamics and trends that take place at the macro level. Conflicting opinions come from Iceland. Someone says that this new government is going in the right way and fights quite strongly the financial capitalism. On the other hand, someone else says that this is absolutely not enough, that actually the information coming from Iceland are in many ways a sort of propaganda of the government, and that Iceland, as a matter of fact, is going back to the lifestyles and the development model existing before the crisis. Therefore, probably it is the moment to observe what is currently happening. I think that if someone has freedom of information at heart, and on the other hand, wants selfishly to know something that he or she doesn't know, or that he or she knows only by hearsay, something which he or she can take some cues to search for other kinds of solutions even more applicable in the near future, and even closer to what we experience every day, then he or she can finance this documentary to get new cues for reflection, to be a little more aware of what is happening, not only in Iceland, but in the whole world, that largely affect our everyday lives, our habits, our way of living.